friends. I'm Carrie Jo, and this is Holy Chuckles Podcast, a space where all meets honesty and where God's gentle humor shows up in the people he chooses. So pull up a seat, take a breath, and let's look together for the sacred in the everyday and the quiet laughter of a God who delights in working through our imperfect stories. Last time, we talked about recognizing the inner voices that don't honor our worth and how they interrupt sacred moments of growth. Today, we're going to go one step further, looking at what happens when those same patterns don't just interrupt us once, but show up again and again, creating pressure and urgency inside us. Let's step into verse 14 and 15. Would plunge the fork into the pan or kettle or cauldron or pot. Whatever the fork brought up, the priest would take for himself. This is how they treated all the Israelites who came to Shiloh. But even before the fat was burned, the priest's servant would come and say to the person who was sacrificing, "Give the priest some meat to roast. He won't accept boiled meat from you, but only raw." Verse 14, the literal. It said, whatever the fork brought up, the priest would take for himself. This is how they treated all the Israelites who came to Shiloh. The priest's servant used the fork to pull out the meat from the pot. Whatever came up, no matter what part, they kept. There was no discernment, no restraint, no reverence. This wasn't a one-time abuse, it was their standard practice. Every person who came to worship at Shiloh was treated this way. This verse emphasizes repetition and normalization of the abuse. Symbolically, this verse shifts the focus from interruption to pattern. The fork is an intrusive inner habit, belief, or reaction. Whatever brought up is anything vulnerable, meaningful, or forming inside you. The priest, when it says they took it for themselves, is these patterns consume your energy, confidence, or peace. All who came to Shiloh, because remember, Shiloh means peace. It was a place that they would go to worship, that they would set in peace with God. So symbolically, all who came to Shiloh is every attempt to grow, heal, connect, or offer something real. This verse is saying the problem isn't just interruption, it's repetition. Because remember, in the last verses, when the servants would come, they would interrupt the worshipers worshiping, sacrificing, being in the moments with God. A fork, bringing up whatever, taking it for themselves. This is repetition to that interruption of worship. The fork, those intrusive inner habits, those intrusive inner beliefs, those intrusive inner reactions, they don't just show up randomly. They show up every time something sacred is forming. Every time something sacred is forming inside you. they show up. And here's what they take. They take confidence before it settles, peace before it stabilizes, clarity before it matures, worth before it roots. And because it happens repeatedly, it can start to feel normal and even inevitable. In real life, this verse helps us recognize some things that are very specific, patterns that appear every time you try to grow. You may notice whenever you start something meaningful, the same doubt will appear. Whenever you feel grounded, the same anxiety interrupts. Whenever you feel aligned, the same questioning starts to rise. Verse 14 names this not as a flaw, but as a pattern. For me, this is very true in my life. Whenever I start to feel confident in the things that I'm doing, whenever I start to feel good that I'm making progress, something comes right in to show me differently. Maybe it's a doubt. Maybe it's that inner voice saying, you're not doing it right. You're not going to make it. You're not going to succeed in what you are doing. Maybe that's the voice. Maybe it's my worthiness coming back in. Maybe because I am not serving others. And remember, I'm a fixer. I'm a person who is a servant leader. And right now, I have no one to serve. Maybe, not even just maybe, a lot of the times, my inner voice says, what are you good for? You're not serving. What are you doing? You're not offering anything to anyone. Because see, right now, God has me sitting still. God has me sitting in my own space. Most of the time with no one around. It's me and my cat. Every now and again, I'll see some friends. Every now and again, I'll go out to an event. But more often than not, I'm here in my own space because God has pulled me away from anyone and everything. Because God said, you will not be serving. You are more than your service. And sometimes I forget that. Sometimes I think to myself, what am I doing? I'm not serving. I'm not doing. I'm not out and about giving all of who I am to somebody. Where is my worth? What am I worth? And God says, boom, Carrie Joe, boom. I have you right where I want you because you have not learned yet that your worth is not in your service. Your worth is in who you are, and who you are is a child of God. And that's it. There's nothing else you have to be. There is nothing else you have to do. There is nothing else but just be my child. Ah, who would have thought in our lives, all we have to be is God's child, and that is enough. How many of you are striving every day to climb that corporate ladder, to be the best of the best, to win every competition you are in? Let me tell you about the competition I didn't know I was in. I didn't know I was in a trauma competition. I bet some of you don't know you're in a trauma competition either. I know. I stay silent for a second because I'm having to think, is that a real thing? And yes, because I've experienced it. I just experienced it in my life. I sent someone a message letting them know, hey, I'm trying to change some things in my life. And when I am confused or upset, or maybe we don't agree on something, I'm trying to sit with it, process it, understand it. So I don't just knock that person out of my life or discount them out of my life. I'm trying to open up, right? Understand my healing and understand where I'm at. So when I sent this message, it was, I want to leave my door open, but right now I just don't think we're aligned. Right now, I just don't think we're in the same spot. But it doesn't mean I don't have love for you. And I thought this message was a kind, loving message, and definitely something different from what I've done in my past, which is just shut the door. When I have to shut the door, I want to do it kindly. I want to do it with love and grace. And I want to do it with positive intention. You know what? I want to do it like Christ would do it. And so I tried it out this time. It did not work in my favor. And I think you have to try things to know how they're going to work out. It's not going to work out all the time the same because people are different. We're in different spaces. But this time, woo, I sent a text. This person sent an email. And it was very heartbreaking to me. It was very hurtful. And I had to read it a couple of times. I had to process it and say, you know what? That person is hurting. That person is in a place that I don't want to be in. That person is in a place that I came from. And in this email, this competition was like, I know you've been through some things, but I've been through worse. And I had to stop for a minute and say, wow, I didn't know I was in a trauma competition. In fact, most of my life, I didn't realize that I was in some kind of competition. And maybe you don't either. That email brought up some old anxiety. That email brought up some old doubt that, oh, maybe nothing happened to me. Maybe I didn't really go through anything. Maybe what happened to me wasn't that big of a deal. But see, that person is not me. And that person does not have, I'm going to say this, and I'm not saying it in a negative way, but that person doesn't have my sensitive heart. That person doesn't have my sensitive emotions. So whether that person thought my trauma was valid or not, or my trauma was just as much as theirs, doesn't matter. I almost let those anxieties come back up again. I almost let those doubts of all the things that I have grown from come back up again. I almost let those priest servants pull out the meat from my pot again, instead of saying, no, you know what? I did something good. I changed a pattern. I changed a habit. I also didn't let that anxiety come back in. I didn't let those doubts come back in. I changed a pattern of just walking away with never giving any type of closure. I changed the way that I did things and faced it, knowing this may not go well, but that's okay. I'm going to do it because it's what I need to do for me to change that pattern. And no, this person may not like what I have to say, but it doesn't mean it is not valid. It doesn't mean it's not something God is calling me to do for me to change who I used to be. Another way this verse comes at us in real life is that feeling of, here we go again. When it says the servant, this is how they treated all who came to Shiloh. They did it to everyone. No one was better than the other. There was no one it didn't happen to. In my last episode, I said there is no one that can skip the steps of healing. No one. You have to clean out the muck so you can move forward. There is no magical snap of your finger, wiggle of your nose. There is no magic words that take you past going through that hurt, that pain, and cleaning it out. The here we go again. This is how they treated all who came to Shiloh. This is the moment you realize this isn't personal. This isn't random. This isn't proof you are failing. It's simply an old pattern repeating itself. This is where your awareness begins. So this pain, this hurt, having to go through the muck of it's not personal. God is not pointing you out to say only you have to go through this. It isn't random. God doesn't say, oh, Carrie Joe, you were naughty, so you're going to have to go through all this to live your life in peace. No, it's all of us. No matter what's been done to you, no matter what you've done, you're going to have to open it all up, go through it piece by piece, understand it, work through it. If you have to ask forgiveness, that's what you have to do. Whatever it is, every single one of us to have a peace in our life that we've never understood, we have to go through this. This is what we came here for. We came here to experience things, to live through things, to do things, and then to realize, to remember who we actually are. And then when we remember, we have to say, I'm not really happy with all those things that happened to me before I remembered who I was. So now I got to go back and heal the pain, take care of the wrongs that I did. So that way I can move forward with who I really am, not who I thought I was, who people thought I was, who I tried to be, who my family taught me to be, what those hurts tried to make me be. No, I go and fix all of that. I go and heal all of that. And now I can be who God sent me here to be, because I've remembered who I am, who my soul is, how these repeated patterns quietly erode your self-worth. When something keeps showing up, it can start to feel like truth. You see, when I tried to change a pattern, instead of just closing a door, I tried to change the pattern. What happened was that old stuff came up, not just from someone telling me, but then I started to go, oh my gosh, did I do this the wrong way? Did I hurt that person's feelings? Do I need to apologize? Do I need to call them and say I'm sorry? All those self-doubts crept back in just because of how this person took my message and how that person took my message is not my business. I can't take that on because I am not them. I gave my message in love. They received it how they received it. That is not my problem. How they received it, how they took it in, that is their emotion. That is their response. That is what they need to work on, not me. Because I changed a pattern. I did something that I have never done. I let someone know my truth. I changed just shutting a door and never talking to someone again to telling my truth. And if that person didn't accept it and that person wanted to have a trauma contest, that has nothing to do with me. And now I can move on. This verse invites that shift. Just because a pattern is familiar doesn't mean it has authority. Just because it shows up often doesn't mean it deserves control. And when I released worrying about how I made that person feel, because I didn't make that person feel any type of way. That person felt that way because of their hurts, because of their pain, because of their muck. Not because of me. I just told my truth. And my truth was valid. And when we tell our truth, or when someone tells us their truth, we really need to process it, think about it, understand it, and really think before we respond. Because not only is our response for that person, but our response is for us. And if we are responding in venom, in pain, in hurt, maybe a response is not needed at that moment. Maybe that's the change, the small change we make at that time. Think about that before you respond to something in hurt, anger, or pain. I know I've done it in my past, and I have done it with a vengeance. I have done it and caused pain that was unnecessary because I did it from pain. When you start that shift, it's the beginning of inner authority. This verse 14, doesn't yet show change, but it does show the recognition. And recognition is that first step of change. This recognition is powerful because once you can say, every person who came to worship at Shiloh was treated this way. Once you can say, every person on this planet, every person that you know has had trauma, has been through hurts, has caused trauma, has caused hurts. It's not a competition. It's not who's had more. That's not the competition I want to be in. But once you can say, everyone has had it, every person who came to worship at Shiloh was treated this way, this verse emphasizes repetition and normalization of the abuse. And once you can understand this, once you can realize this, you are shifting and understanding and having inner authority. You are recognizing, and that is the first step of change. With this recognition, you can say to yourself, wait a minute. Every time I try to heal, every time I try to make steps forward, something happens. This specific thing happens, or this person comes in and says something that makes me question it. This is showing you are no longer confused by those repeating patterns. You are becoming now aware of them. This verse teaches us patterns are learned. Repetition doesn't equal truth. Awareness is the first step toward change. Your worth isn't diminished by patterns that repeat. This is where self-worth quietly strengthens, not by force, but by clarity. Verse 15. But even before the fat was burned, the priest's servant would come and say to the person who was sacrificing, give the priest some meat to roast. He won't accept boiled meat from you, but only raw. the literal. In God's instructions, the fat of the sacrifice belonged to the Lord and was burned first. Eli's sons ignored this order. They just didn't ignore it. They didn't care about it. They swept it to the side, could care less about it. Before God's portion was honored, their servant interrupted the process. They interrupted their worship. They demanded raw meat, not what the ritual required. This was not accidental. It was deliberate, and it was self-serving. This verse highlights impatience, entitlement, and a disregard for sacred order. Symbolically, this verse moves us deeper from pattern, which we discussed in verse 14, to now pressure. The fat burned first. That is honoring what is sacred, grounding, and aligned. Before the fat was burned, that's before clarity, peace, or worth is fully rooted within you. The servant, that is automatic inner pressure or old conditioning. Raw meat, that is something unprocessed, rushed, premature, or harsh. This verse shows us an inner dynamic where something inside of you demands action, proof, or output before your inner foundation has been honored. It's not just interruption, it's urgency. It's a push to give something now before it has had time to form with care, meaning, or wholeness. This represents inner forces that rush your growth, bypass grounding, skip self-connection, value output over alignment, push you to give before you are centered. Just like the story I told of sending a text that I felt was loving. My version and that person's version could be different, and that is okay. But when I received the email back, old Carrie Joe would have shot out another email very quickly with not so nice things. That old Carrie Joe, those inner forces that didn't make me sit and process, those inner forces that didn't say, hey, let's think about this before we send this email. Let's think about this before we even respond. Instead, I sat in it and I said, you know what? That's not about me. And I don't have to respond. I don't have to give my energy to that because it's unnecessary. I'm not in a competition. I'm not in a trauma competition. I'm not in a getting to God first competition. I'm not in a healing competition. I am in a life-changing alignment with God. And that is all that matters. This verse often shows up as internal urgency, showed up as my old self if I wanted to quickly respond about why that person was wrong about me. But I don't have to prove that because God knows it. Feeling pressured to act before you're ready. These are moments when you feel pushed to respond before you have processed, when you feel rushed into a decision, when you feel compelled to figure it out immediately, when you feel pressure to perform rather than pause. This verse names that experience. It names the sense that what you naturally offer isn't enough. The priest won't accept boiled meat, only raw. This can feel like your thoughtful response isn't enough. Your gentle pace isn't enough. Your reflective process isn't enough. Something inside insists on something more extreme, faster, or harsher. This can quietly erode self-worth if left unexamined. Everything that I told you about that story, about that email, about that text, that is this. My response wasn't thoughtful enough. That's okay. Me being gentle, because that's a change for everyone in my life. Anyone that has known me in the past, don't get me wrong, I've had my gentle moments. I have always been a loving person, but I used to always say about myself, I am the nicest asshole you'll ever meet. And that wasn't true. I just had not remembered who I really was. And so people in my life, past people in my life, don't really understand who I am now. They don't understand this version of me. They don't understand my gentleness, my boundaries, my willingness to sit and listen with no response because I need to process. I need to look inside myself and make sure I'm not going back to those old responses. Make sure I'm not bringing in that ego, that pride, that old Carrie Joe. Because the one thing I don't want to do is quietly erode my self-worth. This verse shows inner pressure replacing inner wisdom. Instead of listening to your deep knowing, an urgent voice steps in to take over. You may notice tension replacing peace, urgency replacing clarity, pressure replacing discernment. This verse helps us see that not all urgency is wisdom. You know, urgency, when I look at it, I say, if I'm bleeding, I have a broken bone, I need to act urgently. Unless it's something of a medical urgency, I'm going to sit with it. Because in my past, I have always acted urgently. When something came into my brain, I had to do it now, 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 now. And now, I'm going to sit with it, think about it, process it, use my discernment, and more than anything, I'm going to talk to God about it. I'm going to say, God, what do you think about this? God, what should I do? Just like with this email, I said, God, I want to respond. I want to let this person No, whoa, whoa, whoa. Hey, let's back it up. My text didn't go out to cause any strife or pain. My text was letting you know where I was. And then you came back with this email that was full of yuck. And I said, God, what do I do with this? Do I respond? Do I let that person know what my intentions were? What my intentions are? How I feel? And God said, no, it's all right. I'll take care of it. Because there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can say to make this person feel better about the situation. So it's now out of your hands. And I said, okay, God. Don't get me wrong. When I said, okay, God, didn't mean I didn't think about it. I didn't ponder it because I'm an overanalyzer. I'm a thinker. What could I say differently? What could I have done differently? How could I have said it in a way that wouldn't have caused this hurt? And when I started overanalyzing it, God said, it wasn't you. It was the situation. Now stop thinking about it and let me handle it. And sometimes that's very hard for me to let God handle it because I want to know how God's going to handle it, right? I want to know how you're going to handle it. What's the outcome going to be? Is it going to be good? Is it going to be bad? But then, because again, I have all these conversations with God and God said, Carrie Jo, stop it. That ain't your business. How I handle it is my business. What happens out of it is my business. It's between me and this person now. You gave it to me. I said, if you want relief from it, give it to me. And you did. And now it's no longer yours. It no longer belongs to you. It's mine now. And it's mine to do with whatever I choose. And you, Carrie Jo, have to be okay with that. And I said, God, okay. I said, okay. Doesn't mean I'm not going to think about it. And God said, drive yourself crazy. That's okay. That's not my business. That's free will. If you want to think about it all day and all night, go ahead. But it's not yours any longer. So now I'm learning to let it go. This verse teaches us how to honor sequence. Order matters. Grounding matters. What is sacred deserves to come first. Your worth does not need to be proven in haste. Your growth does not need to be rushed. Your offering does not need to be raw, to be real. You see, your offering does not need to be raw, to be real. That's that competition, that competition. Well, I offered God this, or I had this trauma and I went through this, but this is what I did to heal it. This is what I did. These are all the things I had to go through and you had to go through none. Your trauma wasn't like my trauma. You healing to get to God wasn't as bad as my healing. How do you know? All you competitors out there, how do you know my healing, my path to God, my days of understanding, my days of forgiveness, forgiving, My days of accepting wasn't like your days. We don't know, because some people in their healing are more boisterous than others. Some people are quieter. Some people like to heal alone. Some people like to heal with a group. But this sentence, your offering, does not need to be raw to be real. Your offering to God, yourself, your healing, your trauma, the things that you did in your life, they don't have to be worse or better than anyone else's to be real. What has to be real is your want, your desire, and your need to come to God as you are, just as you are, and really be with God to do the work and understand the work that you are doing. It doesn't have to be raw to be real. Why verse 15 matters? Verse 14 showed us repetition. Verse 15 shows us pressure. Together, they reveal how inner patterns repeat and how they escalate by demanding more, faster, sooner. But they also invite a new awareness. You are allowed to slow down. You are allowed to honor what is sacred within you first. You are allowed to give from a grounded place, not from pressure. That awareness is where both self-worth and spiritual trust begins to deepen. I talked to you about the text and the email and the changes that I made in myself. And when I didn't respond to that email with haste and quickness and to defend myself, that is where I knew my awareness of both my self-worth and my spiritual trust was deepening. Verse 14 and 15 together help us see something important about our inner world. Verse 14 shows us that some patterns don't appear once, they repeat. They show up whenever something meaningful is forming inside us, quietly interrupting our peace and becoming familiar over time. Verse 15 takes it one step further. It shows us how those same patterns often come with urgency, a pressure to give, to act, or to decide before we're grounded, before what's sacred has time to settle within us. Together, these verses remind us that repetition and urgency are not the sign of truth or wisdom. They are often signals that an old pattern is trying to take control. But here's the shift these verses invite. You are allowed to slow down. You are allowed to honor what is sacred within you first. You are allowed to give from a place of clarity rather than pressure. Growth doesn't need to be rushed to be real. Your worth doesn't need to be proven through urgency. And your inner life deserves patience, discernment, and care. As you continue this journey both with God and within yourself, these verses 14 and 15 invite you to notice the difference between your inner pressure and your inner knowing, and to choose the voice that leads you towards peace. Something to think about. Where do you notice a familiar sense of urgency showing up in your life? And what might it look like to pause long enough to honor what is sacred within you first? Thank you so much for joining in today. May you give yourself the time and space to become who you already are.